Slackville Road, a novel by Vago Damitio. To get this great American novel, go to vagobond.com. That's VAGOBOND.com. Chapter 1. Once upon a time, in a small Hawaiian town, I was a child among the privileged. Yet I still had come to the realization that most of the adults around me were fucked up. Make that all of the adults. I don't just mean the adults in Hawaii, I mean all of the adults in the entire United States. Maybe all of the adults in the world. My parents, for example, were miserable. They tried to escape their misery in a non-stop roller coaster of fucking, fighting, and pretending that everything was going to be all right. Beautiful strangers would sleep over at our beautiful beach house in beautiful Hawaii. Wild parties with blue and red colored lights strung across the lanai framing, the swaying hips of drunken hula, and everything in the world seeming wonderful, as my brother and I hoped that the inevitable call to bed wouldn't come. But it always did, and the adults moved closer together, with Mum in the hands of a new uncle, and Dad wandering down the beach with a Listone auntie. As a kid in Hawaii, every adult becomes uncle or auntie, even for the howly kids like us. He'd go to bed with everything in the world seeming right, and the sounds of the slack key guitar kissing us goodnight. Morning was different. Uncle and auntie would usually be gone by the time we woke up. Mom would be snappish, and Dad would be gone. By the time he returned, the fighting would begin. Free love didn't seem to have anything to do with love, just a lot of hurt people with no one to blame for all the failed experiments. The parties at my parents' house had lots of drugs, lots of swingers, and lots of polyester. There didn't seem to be much else, nothing that lasted anyway. When I was 6 years old, I learned to read. Like most American kids in the 70s, my favorite publications was the Highlights magazine at the dentist office. You remember Highlights, right? It was filled with those morality lessons that religious people want kids to experience. I still remember emphasizing with Goofus as he got the short end of the stick in his relations with the goofy two-shoes brother Gallant. In one cartoon story, he grabbed the biggest cookie off the plate and it ended up tasting like dog shit, while Gallant's little cookie ended up tasting like Mama from heaven. The morale was that smaller portions taste better. Most of Americans' fat asses should have listened to that lesson, though I don't think Highlights meant anything like a matter of diet. More a matter of morale-enforced humility. Leave the biggest pieces for those that deserve them. I figured if there was shit in the batter, it all got in the cookies. I hated Gallant, the first of many uptight, pompous, self-righteous Christians I would learn to detest. Our neighbor, who the kids called the preacher lady, had found salvation through Jesus and the Jehovah's Witnesses. She tried her best to recruit the whole neighborhood. It seemed to be working out for her until one day, when everyone came outside to witness a fire in her front yard, and her daughter pleading for her to stop doing what she was doing. "They are possessed by Satan," the preacher lady screamed as she threw Barbie, Ken, Dazzle, and dozens of other dolls into the fire. Noticing that a crowd had gathered, she tried to explain. "She worships these dolls more than she worships Jehovah. It is because of the evil demons that live in them. We must burn Satan and his minions out of our lives." She said she was exorcising demons, but no one else thought she would have burned all her daughter's dolls. Not that anyone tried to stop her. In those days, parents would raise their children however they wanted. As for me, I wasn't sure about the whole Jesus thing. It seemed like Jesus wanted you to fight for what you believe in, but nobody that claimed to follow Jesus seemed to get that. I wanted to find out about God, so I asked my parents if I could go to church. They said yes, but I would have to go alone. That was okay with me. A brightly painted school bus would pick me up every Sunday morning. They would drop me off in the afternoon. It was sort of fun. They would read us stories, have us make drawings, and tell us about the Bible. When I asked serious questions, though, they always laughed and got nervous. They never answered. I asked, if we're supposed to love our enemies, should we love the devil? He's our enemy, right? No explanation, except that's not what Jesus meant. I was confused. Why would he say it if he didn't mean it? Maybe the devil wasn't really my enemy. I'd ask if God wrote the Bible in English, and they would tell me he wrote it in all languages. That was pretty cool. How did he do it? When I asked why God killed everyone but his son preached forgiveness, they told me that God was different than Jesus. Then 2 minutes later, they told me that Jesus and God were the same. I finally figured out that they were crazy. They didn't know anything at all. So I quit asking them questions and stopped paying attention. Sunday school was still fun. I went for almost a year, but quit shortly after they moved me out of Sunday school class for bad behavior. I remember it like it was yesterday. A little girl named Malia was sitting in front of me as the youth pastor told us about the Temple on the Mount. She was wearing jeans, and her little butt crack was showing between the top of her jeans and her pink top. I forgot about God, except for the God I knew, who existed at the end of that little butt crack. While the youth pastor talked about some temple on the mound, my 5-year-old penis was getting hard, thinking about her 7-year-old temple on the mound. My hands had the mind of their own, as they both tried to shoot down her pants. That was the end of Sunday school for me. After that, I had to sit in the pews with the old people. There was no drawing, no stories. Just the preacher up there telling everyone how bad they were. Sometimes some of the old ladies would stand up and start babbling and dancing. It looked fun. They were supposed to be filled with the Holy Spirit. I figured they were faking it, though, because they wanted attention. Everyone fawned all over them after the service. I figured if they were faking, I could fake it. If they caught me, I would know it was real and start to pay attention. If they didn't catch me, I would never come back. So midway through the preacher's sermon, I stood up and started kicking my heels about like the devil had possessed me. I screamed out, babbling that sounded like the old ladies babbling, and spun myself around in circles. Finally, when I was tired, I fell to the floor. It was more fun than anything I'd ever done in church. At the end, the whole congregation stood around me talking about how the Spirit had possessed me. When the preacher asked me how it felt to be possessed by God, I got up, left the church, and walked home. Even at a young age, I hated people that fooled themselves. It wasn't my only dysfunction, though. I loved to fight, too. As a white kid in Hawaii, you either liked fighting or you hated school. I liked both. Fridays were known as Kill Howley Day, and if you didn't know how to fight, you might as well not go to school. The Hawaiian and Asian kids, collectively referred to as the locals, who would spend the day pummeling every white or Howley kid they could find. They would go on until the kids' parents pulled them from school, or until the Howley kid had proven that you could dish out a little punishment. Kids like me, that liked fighting, eventually ended up getting left alone by the locals. They wouldn't fight us, so we would fight each other instead. I used to fight a kid named Sydney every day, all the way through the 3rd grade. We were friends during the school day, but we'd always argue on the bus, and he would either get off at my bus stop or I would get off at his, and we would scrap until someone broke us up. To read the rest, go to vagobond.com and pick up a copy.